First, tonight's sports headlines.
Good evening, I'm Austin Norman. Time now for the Sports Ticker, brought to you by Cornerstone Bank. While times seem uncertain, Cornerstone Bank is here for you and your financial needs, just like they have been for the last 138 years. When times are difficult, there is no place like Nebraska. Bank on a solid foundation with Cornerstone Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender. A former Husker football player earned some preseason recognition today. Linebacker Levante David, who has played for the Tampa Bay Bucks since 2012, was named to the NFL Network's Top 100 Players list for the 2020 season. It's the second time he's been named to that list. The first time was in 2016. Brooklyn Nets point guard Kyrie Irving pledged $1.5 million to WNBA players who choose to opt out of playing in the season the league is holding in Bradenton, Florida. The money will come from a foundation Irving launched today, and players will apply through said foundation and be given the money at a later date. Big news out of Major League Baseball. 14 members of the Miami Marlins tested positive for COVID-19 over the weekend. That includes 12 players and 2 staff members. The team is set to play Baltimore in its home opener tonight. That game has been postponed. The start of the Phillies-Yankees series was also postponed since the Phillies hosted the Marlins over the weekend. One final score from Major League Baseball earlier today. The Athletics topped the Angels 3-0 in Oakland. Plenty of games in progress right now. Middle of the 8th inning, the homestanding Padres lead the Diamondbacks 6-2. In the bottom of the 3rd, the Blue Jays lead the Nationals 1-0. Top of the 1st, no score between the Cubs and the Reds, and top of the 2nd, it's 1-0 Braves over the Rays. Coming up in just a few minutes, we'll have first pitch between the Brewers and the Pirates from PNC Park in Pittsburgh. Also from Comerica Park for Royals and Tigers, as well as Minute Maid Park for the Astros hosting the Mariners. Live inside the Husker Sports Network studios, I'm Austin Norman.
Your state. Your team. Your show. This is Sports Nightly.
2 wideouts to the left. Mills in the backfield with Martinez. Adrian gets the snap, gives it off to Mills. Mills spins away. He's shot 40, 45, 50, 45, 40, 35, 30. Tightrope to the sideline, steps out of bounds inside the 30-yard line. Dedrick Mills has been a man today here in Lincoln.
Now, let's check the pulse of Husker Nation with your hosts, Greg Sharp and Tim Curran.
Got a week of Sports Nightly underway. How lucky are you? Be able to sit and listen to us for a couple of hours, huh, Tim? I mean, come on. That's like winning the lottery.
We're just here. We're giving the people what they want. We're here to bring warm cheer to everyone in these uncertain times, a phrase you've heard far too many times. And, I mean, right now there's baseball on my TV. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to say that, but right now I can say it.
Oh, yeah, there's 2 games going on. I was watching I saw the A's finish off the Angels. The A's, by the way, my pick to win the AL West. They're 3-1. Padres are playing the Diamondbacks and winning that game. Tonight you've got, well, at least on my sports package, I'm going to have the Royals and Tigers coming up, and I think then it's the Red Sox. Is the Red Sox the Yankees? Maybe a little bit later on tonight. So lots of baseball going on. Let's start there because that's been the biggest story of the day, and that was the news of the Marlins, who yesterday it came out before their final game of their series in Philadelphia that they had a couple players test positive. They did a full test of the team, and then they didn't leave them. They did not let them get on a plane and fly out of Philadelphia last night. They stayed, got their test results this morning, and it was worse. You had 12 players, two staff members, so 14 of their members of their travel party tested positive, and so they are still in Philadelphia, to my knowledge, and their home opener tonight with Baltimore has been postponed, delayed, canceled, and then the Yankees were coming into Philadelphia, so they were going to use that same clubhouse that the Marlins were in all weekend long. They want to fumigate the place and clear it out, so the Yankees not playing tonight at all. And I think the reaction early today, Tim, was that that's it. Baseball's done. You surprised that they didn't pull the plug?
Well, yes and no. I think that if it were just the Marlins, because right now we don't really know. I mean, if the Phillies or Yankees start getting some positives and multiple of them, then yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Manfred were to pull the plug, tomorrow. But I think right now what MLB is probably trying to do is just to see was this just a localized outbreak to the Marlins, and can they keep it contained, and is this going to be the only sort of flare-up? But there are just so many questions that, number one, how did these players get it? I mean, I guess it's hard you can't really bubble it up when you're traveling halfway around the country, so that's probably where they got it. Maybe I was at an airport, or I know they probably fly private a lot, so I'm not really sure how that all works. But the other thing, too, is instead of shutting down, I know they have that the taxi squad they might be able to lean on. I don't know if the Marlins can do that. But, I mean, we are getting close to somewhat of a disaster because, the NBA has gone off without a hitch so far. MLS has gone off without a hitch, again, so far. NHL, I think the same deal. But Major League Baseball, because they don't have a bubble, now you have the I think 13 it was that tested positive. And that just starts raising some concerns because you think, okay, well, they just played the Phillies and they just played, or they're going to play the Yankees. And did any of those guys get it? And then does this just start spreading across the league if they don't? And then the also thing is, can you make these games up? Because they said it's postponed, but there's not really a lot of room on the back end of the schedule to make these games up. So I don't know. There's just so many unanswered questions right now that we're all just kind of walking on eggshells, just kind of thinking, I hope they don't cancel it, but really not knowing what's going to happen.
Well, it was a divisional. No, tonight's games were not divisional. They're playing Baltimore, who they're going to play a little bit on the opposite end. Here's my thought, is that you're probably going to have more flare-ups like this as we go through the next 2 months. And so teams are going to have games canceled by this. What I think you do, I think when the regular season ends, if you've got games that still need to be played to complete your playoff picture, I think you're going to have to go back and play them. You're going to go back and play them. So maybe the playoffs are delayed a week. To get some games in that may decide who gets that last playoff spot or who wins the division or comes in second or gets one of those things. So you may have to have a buffer. You do have, I think there's six or seven built-in days off.
I think it's six.
They could go make up a doubleheader one day when they have to play that. Because of the expanded rosters, you can handle doubleheaders a lot better than if you were at the 25-man roster, which is normal for Major League Baseball. So they're going to have to be creative. They're going to have to, and I think this isn't it. It's not going to stop in the Marlins. It may be another week or two before somebody else has a flare-up, but I think, Tim, we're going to have some of that. And I think the message for the rest of the pro leagues, and the NFL's watching this too, is we're going to have to be flexible with this whole thing. And there's already a story up at CBSSports.com about the NFL may not get their full 16 games in. They may have to ratchet it back a little bit and build in some more bye weeks for teams to overcome some of these spikes that I think are going to pop up over the next 3-4 months.
Right. I think, unfortunately, I think you're right. I think the NFL has at least one advantage in that you could go to sort of a weird schedule where you're playing every other week instead of every week, but then getting a full 16 games in probably wouldn't work in that scenario. Maybe you cut it down to 12, and they already don't have a preseason, so that's already impacted them there. But you're right. I mean, there are going to be more flare-ups because in Major League Baseball you can't really do a bubble-type thing where you're only playing in one stadium or one or two stadiums. That wouldn't really work, trying to get all those games in. So their hands are kind of tied to that perspective. But I mean, yeah, you're right. There are probably some ways they're going to have to get creative. Maybe it doesn't happen under that same format as you were saying. Maybe they have to push the playoffs back by a week. It might be more than that, given how many of these flare-ups do occur. But, I mean, you can still hold out hope that this was just a incident of maybe there was one guy. Because the other thing I'm kind of curious about, too, is you don't want to make this into a witch hunt type scenario, but you kind of wonder how the player or whoever the staff member was that contracted it first, were they quarantining? Were they wearing a mask? And where did they go do something stupid like, go to a massive party or go to a barbecue and pick it up there? So I don't know. And that probably doesn't matter in the whole grand scheme of things, but you just hope that Major League Baseball players have to be extra precautious so that they don't start spreading this thing around when you don't have a bubble type thing. So that's just my only concern, but I'm still keeping my fingers crossed. I mean, for now, there's a few games. Looking at the schedule, it looks like, the Cubs and Reds, that's postponed. Yankees, Phillies was postponed. White Sox, Indians, Orioles, and Marlins obviously postponed. But the rest of the games tonight, like you said, Royals and Tigers, Mets and Red Sox, those are still going on as scheduled, and there's been no announcement for the weekend or for the rest of the week's games. So I guess right now you just kind of have to cross your fingers and cross your toes and hope for the best.
Yeah, you got weather issues right now in both Cincinnati and Cleveland. That's why those games are having trouble getting going tonight. It has nothing to do with COVID. It's just Mother Nature's jumping in there and dropping some raindrops in there. Now, flexibility is going to be the whole key for all of this, and it's kind of going to be I'm not going to say new norm, because I think we're going to get back to some stability in the next year. But I think for the next 3 to 4 months. And we saw it over the weekend in college football. Oklahoma, set to open their season September the 5th against Missouri State, announced we're going the last Saturday of August. We're bumping her up. We're going week 0. We're going to get a game in, get a week off. KU lost an opponent with New Hampshire deciding not to play football this fall. They go out and get Southern Illinois, and they go, we're going to play week 0. Give us another bye week to put in there. So already you're seeing in college football teams that are going, we're just going to get creative here. We're going to start building our own bye weeks in there, see if we can get this thing in. So I think sports fans, you better just be flexible on what you're going to have to do. And these organizations, universities, they're going to have to be creative in how they try to get this thing in.
Right, they're gonna get in by hook or by crook, and I kind of smiled a little bit when I saw that news, because it's almost like the Big 12 is thumbing their nose at the Big 10 a little bit, because they're actually bumping these games up to play non-con games, and it does make some sense from the standpoint of, really the only reason, and probably the major driving point, and why the Big Ten canceled non-con games was because of that story that came out about SDSU fearing that they didn't have the resources to test all their players. Because from the other perspective of, I think the idea being that, they're just playing games kind of in that region, but, Nebraska having to play Rutgers, traveling halfway across the country, that doesn't make a ton of sense if you're talking about a region perspective. So, if Oklahoma and Kansas, if they want to bump a game up to week 0, the end of August, and then have that cushion in between, to me, as long as you're regularly testing and just being on top of things, there shouldn't be so much of a problem, especially for that first game when you've had guys on campus for a while, you've had them localized, you've had them semi-quarantined, and relatively speaking, which guys are healthy, which guys are not. That shouldn't be a huge deal, and you just hope that it's going to be a ginormous task for the coaching staff to make sure these guys are all accounted for. Make sure that, like, on the weekend, they're not, going out to a bar with 250 plus people, cramming in there. In fact, there's probably a lot of states and cities you probably still can't do that. So, but it's just going to be a matter of, can the coaching staff keep everyone kind of corralled, to use a awkward phrase, just make sure everyone is staying responsible here, making sure no one's putting anyone in jeopardy, and hopefully be able to see the season out.
We still haven't seen the revised Big Ten schedule. I am told by several sources it's out. The schools have it, but they've not officially released it, and that's going to have to come from the conference office. So we thought maybe today would be the day that popped out. I think it's definitely going to be this week that the Big Ten says, all right, here's the schedule, here's who everybody's going to play, and when right now we have them scheduled to play. So I think I'm anxiously awaiting that. I want to see what it looks like. Do they just go with what they had and then sprinkle in one more opponent, or do they completely shuffle it up and change it? So I can't wait to see it, but I was told today on 2 different occasions that the schools do have the schedules. The league has shared that with them, but they just have not made the formal announcement. So waiting on pins and needles for that. All right, here's what we have on the show tonight. Jeremiah Searles coming up here in a couple of minutes. Going to check in with him. We love hearing his Husker Huddle conversations on a Wednesday night. This Wednesday it's going to be Tommy Armstrong. He's going to be sitting down with us, but I'm going to sit down with Jeremiah here in a couple minutes. We're going to talk a lot of things, get his thoughts about the NFL, coming to an agreement with the NFLPA so that they can get their camps opened up. There were some concerns on the Players Association, and rightfully so, about the health standards of this. What's the testing going to look like? What's the protocol going to be if somebody tests positive? You have, Tim, seen news today of some teams saying, we got 4 guys that have tested positive. We're putting them into isolation, or we're separating them from the rest of the team. Maybe a little easier to deal with from the NFL standpoint, because they can go to a waiver wire and pull somebody in to help fill a body for a practice spot. It may be a little bit easier for them, but you are starting to see some of that around the NFL as well, with guys as they ramp up their testing throughout the league.
Right, and the NFL's had so much time to prepare for this, and you are seeing, the NFLPA had already made an agreement with the league. I mean, they're scheduled to go on, but I did see some articles too about players raising concerns and they're not going to get hazard pay, all this stuff, and you do start to worry a little bit about that. But you're right. I mean, they still have the benefit of time on their side, not for too much longer now, but they still have a little bit of time to get this figured out. And again, because they aren't going to be in a bubble situation, they're probably going to have to, like we said earlier, going to have to get creative with this schedule. Or maybe they switch to a format where they're playing every other week, or maybe they don't get the full 16 games in. But I don't know. I think there's still you can still be somewhat optimistic, I think, at this point. There's no point in pulling your hair out. I mean, I don't have any hair left, but I wouldn't be pulling it out quite yet, because I think that there's still enough time for people to figure out what's going on, get guys quarantined if they need to be, and let that get through their system, and hopefully they can return to playing soon.
All right, that's what we have here on the show tonight. Those are some of the topics we're attacking. 866-HUSKER 1-866-487-5371. When we come back, Jeremiah Searles, he will join us next.
You're listening to Sports Nightly. This is...
Hope you had a good weekend. I got a chance to watch my middle daughter graduate from high school. That was fun to see that happen over the weekend. Glad that was able to take place. Weather was warm, but that's okay. Summertime is supposed to be kind of warm. Well, one guy that's always hot on topic is Jeremiah Searles. He works with us here at the Husker Sports Network. We play his segment every Wednesday night called Husker Huddle, where he sits down with former Cornhuskers. Some of them are his teammates, some were not. Great stuff there as always. Jeremiah, great to have you with us. I hope you and your family are surviving this crazy COVID summer that we're having.
Yeah, man, it's been crazy. First of all, I hate being locked up at home. I need to be out and about and doing things. I'm as about as extrovert as they come. My wife, on the other hand, she loves it. Huge introvert, loves staying at home. So she's been finding ways to get me out of the house. But it's just been weird. I mean, seeing guys like Spencer and Qualley, and for my first year being retired, I fully expected for all those guys to be gone, off to OTAs, doing their thing, and they've all been here, and we've all been hanging out, and it's just been really bizarre. That's the best way I can think to describe it. Is there's no way like, well, why is this happening? Well, it's just kind of happening, and it seems like everything's changing day to day, but. I mean, overall, it's been good. I've been trying to ride the Peloton as much as possible, lose some weight, and start trying to get back into fighting shape here. So,
well, let's start with the NFL angle. Last week there was the NFL and the NFLPA apparently came to an agreement on how to handle the medical part of this whole thing. How optimistic are you that they can at least get camps underway here in the next week or so?
Man, I was feeling more optimistic till I followed the Vikings, obviously, and I just saw they had to put like 5 guys on that COVID IR, including their head athletic trainer, Eric Sugarman, now also has COVID. So it's going to be things like that of how serious does that make people start to worry? Or is that something that we're just going to be like, hey, this is going to happen this season, so let's deal with it and move forward? Because it's going to be one thing or the other. It's going to be, nope, everything's canceled, can't do it anymore, push the whole thing because this is happening, or hey, this is going to happen regardless all season. It's impossible to go through the entire season without someone or some group catching this at one point in time. Like, let's start making protocols now during training camp and see how they respond so that when we get to season, we have everything kind of written out, which is what I hope they do. But, I mean, you saw with the Marlins today when they got the games canceled for baseball. So it's just, man, it's one of those things of how do you react? Do you overreact? Do you underreact? Do you do it just right? And, I mean, everyone's flying by the seat of their pants. But I think we'll get camp off the ground. I don't know if we'll get games off the ground just yet.
Is anybody going to their training camp sites, or are they all staying where they just work out during the season? Do you know?
Yeah, so all off-site training camps have been canceled. Everyone's at their facility. Everyone's doing their thing. I mean, I have heard through the grapevine that teams like San Diego, San Francisco, I mean, coastal teams that states are still shut down, about moving entire organizations somewhere else so they can at least like practice and have things going. So that's in the works for sure. But everyone's reporting to their facility because that's the best place they can keep everyone in their quote-unquote bubble. That's where they have all their facilities, they have all their testing, they have everything set up there, and then it's just going to basically be a show up every day, take your temperature, have your test, see if you're negative, positive, and then try and go about your day as business as normal.
Again, visiting Jeremiah Searles. He works with us here at the Husker Sports Network. Let's bring it back to the Huskers now. They have been together most of the summer now this team has. Last Friday, the clock got cranked up to 20 hours a week that they can spend with their coaches. They can even get out on the field a little bit, kind of an OTA type thing for college football. Jeremiah, what are the chances that they do this one year and they like this kind of setup where you get kind of a little camp before you dive into the fall drills? You think that could happen?
I think it could happen. I don't see why they don't. I think the OTA setup that the NFL system has is fantastic. It's a ramp-up period. I mean, it's basically spring ball, but right before camp. It's very similar, but it's just not as intense as spring ball is. I mean, spring ball in college is look at all our shiny new toys, let's make them hurt each other and play each other type of thing. Versus like in the NFL, it's very much more like let's put an install in and but also it's much more development in college. So I don't know. I think that they'll like it. I think that they'll enjoy the ability to kind of ramp up and then hit the ground running into fall camp versus here's our full summer program, take a couple weeks off, and then let's hit the ground running and hope that we're all caught up. So I like the schedule piece to it. I'd be curious to see how they would want to implement that when it's normal times, not COVID times. And I think that it could work, though.
You and I are on the same page about there's this really, I don't see any way you can move an entire college football season to the spring and then ask those student athletes to come back in the fall. Tom Chattel, the Omaha World Herald, had a piece over the weekend where he kind of outlined maybe breaking the season in two. Get 5 or 6 games in the fall and then a handful of games in the spring and then have that way be a complete year within one calendar school year. Could that work if you're not trying to play 8 or 9 in the spring, but maybe 4 in the spring? Would that be acceptable, do you think?
No. I think if you're going to do it, just do it, man. Like if you're going to have football in the fall, have football in the fall and know that if you cancel the season, if the season gets postponed, you get 5 games, you get 4 games, whatever it might be, you can't turn around and have it back in the spring. It's just not, it doesn't make any sense. If you're going to have football in the fall at all, you are then saying that until next fall, September of 2021, there will not be competitive football against other teams again. I just don't think it's safe. First of all, that's the biggest thing, the safety for the players. I mean, you have to ramp yourself up so long to get into playing in game shape and season shape that by the time if you play 5 games in the fall, you then have to let your body recover when your body's really just kind of hitting its stride. I mean, your body finally has kind of gotten into this routine of what game week's like, what it's like to recover and how it works. And all of a sudden you just stop that, start training again, and then you have to try and like re-ramp up for the spring. I just don't think it would work from a safety or a strength and conditioning standpoint. But then also, if you think about it from if the NFL goes this spring or goes all fall, what are those guys going to do that want to go to the NFL? I mean, then what? Are they going to be playing games or are they going to have guys that played half the year and then just said, screw it, signed with agents, moved on, said, I'm training for the NFL? Because then the NFL is going to be like, well, we're not going to wait. Like, they're not going to wait for college football. They got to go on with business as normal. So I think that the spring football scenario for me is probably almost doomsday worst case scenario for college football.
Yeah.
I think that even if they could get 4 games in this year, that's better than nothing. And they tried, they did everything they could, and then guess what? World stopped and world said no, and we got to move on and wait till next fall. The idea of trying to get these kids to play in, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nebraska in February too, like, ooh, no, thank you.
Yeah, it might be a little frigid in those states for some of that northern football. All right, let's talk about this team a little bit. One of the big storylines in the offseason has been with Matt Farniak getting moved to the inside. You played both guard tackle at Nebraska. What kind of adjustment is that going to be for Matt?
Yeah, I think this is a great move for a guy like Farniak. I think that he was a little out of position out there at tackle, but that's really good for him to get that experience out there and work with those speed rushers, edge rushers. But you move a guy like that inside who's just a massive human, right? I mean, you and I both sat there and shook Matt's hand. He's a big kid, and he's what I like to call as a phone booth player. Like, let him get inside, let him get used. The one thing that really is the biggest difference from moving from guard or tackle to guard is the timing and pass protection. So at tackle, you have to be very patient, right? You have to you take your set, you let the defensive guy come to you. Once he gets in your cylinder, in your bubble, you strike him. At guard, they're on you right away. They're right there. You're going from your stance, hands, boom, right to the guy. And sometimes that takes guys a little bit of adjusting to get used to because you're used to like having a half a second or maybe even a full second before contact at tackle in the pass game. And then all of a sudden you move into guard and things are happening so much quicker. I mean, it's just the timing of everything speeds way up. I mean, you're closer to the ball. Everything's more condensed. You got guys on both sides of you now. So I think that not having a spring ball for a guy like Matt really sucks for him, because I think he could be a really, really good guard, but he's going to be kind of figuring out as he goes here with training camp and with once season really just gets rolling. But I think he's going to be a guy that you'll see him just get gradually more comfortable and gradually better at it as the year goes on. And hopefully we get a full 10 games. I mean, he could be a guy that I think could have the potential of being second team, first team, all Big Ten type guard with just his raw, brutal strength that he can just move guys with in that interior line of scrimmage.
Let's slide over a spot to the center position. How much improvement do you expect to see from Cam Jurgens this year?
I expect to see a lot. This is another guy that I think really needed spring ball just to, again, have the game slow down for him. I think a lot of times last year, people focused on the snaps, but I think the snaps were going crazy because his mind was on a million other things. As a center, which I played center in the league, you have to know that snapping is just like walking for you. You can't think about it. It's just got to be so second nature that you're just like, because you're looking at mic points, you're looking at safety rotation, you're looking at all these different things that if you're worried about, oh crap, the snap, you're not focusing on everything else that you need to focus on. And so I think a lot of times he was just playing too out of control in his mind, not necessarily physically. I think the game was going about 50 miles an hour and his brain was going about 100. And so I think that if the game can slow down for him, he'll be just fine. So I hope that he's been snapping as much as he can. I mean, he should be snapping the ball 100 times a day at minimum, and just taking his steps, walking through mental reps, just like, how do I get up to the line of scrimmage? And it's like, okay, identify the front, identify the mic, identify our position group, make the call, snap the ball. And that's just, he needs to have a process. Every center needs to have that process as they walk to the line of scrimmage that they go through every single time. Run, pass, RPO, it doesn't matter. And so I hope he's developed that process. And I know Greg Austin talks with Al about it because he played the position as well.
Again, visiting with Jeremiah Searles here on Sports Nightly on the Husker Sports Network. You mentioned Greg Austin. Third year now as the offensive line coach here in Nebraska. So we've kind of seen what he likes to do, and we've also seen who he likes to identify on the recruiting trail. We've talked a lot in the last couple of months about how big that room is getting from a size standpoint, 6'8", 6'7" guys. More like what we saw really during your year when you saw guys like Qualley coming through and yourself. What do you think that says about what they look for when they're trying to go identify future players?
I think you got to have big guys up front. I think not a knock on any of those guys that played in the Riley area, but I mean, you start looking across the board and you'd be like 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", and they're just not that big. And you're playing in the Big Ten against big human beings on the other side. You go into the NFL, most NFL linemen 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". I mean, so you got to recruit guys that have NFL talent. You think that could have NFL talent that are just based off their size, because you can develop everything else. You can't coach size. I mean, you can't coach a guy to be 6'7" and have a wingspan of 7 foot. Like, that's just God-given. And so I think that you want to go get some of those guys that have that raw talent, because you can develop them into very good players here at Nebraska, and then hopefully move them on to the NFL where they can have great careers. But that all starts with just getting the framework in the door. So I think that they want that nasty, big up front team that they kind of model after, of road graders, and then you sprinkle in these skill position players. You can just do a lot of things, but nothing matters if you can't get the ball run in between the tackles with big bodies.
Yeah, well, we've certainly seen that. Well, we've really enjoyed your Husker Huddles on Wednesday. What's that been like for you, talking to some of your old teammates and then some guys that you haven't played with? What's it been like?
Yeah, it's been awesome. It is a little different going from interviewer to interviewee. Sometimes you start to you want to talk and you're like, but I'm interviewing the guy. And so it's been awesome. I've loved doing it. I love you guys over there at Husker Sports Network for giving me a chance to do it. And it's been a ton of fun. It's great to reconnect with some old guys and really just kind of see what everyone's been up to. I think that's the great piece, is some of these guys we haven't talked to in maybe a couple of years or 3 years, and they kind of been unplugged from the Huskers media world for a while. So just getting to reconnect with them and see what they're doing. I mean, I think Quincy's interview last week was great because he's part of the NFLPA. He's very plugged into all that, and he was able to give some great in-depth stuff. And you get guys like Blake Lawrence, who completely ventured off and he's doing a CEO thing now. And I mean, I'm excited to get caught up with guys that aren't in football anymore. guys that have moved on and they're taking different avenues in life. I know that I'm trying to get Jordan Westerkamp to join and Josh Mitchell and guys that are just out there killing it in other things in life. I think it's fun to keep up with those guys too.
Well, it's been really fun to hear those. We enjoy those every Wednesday night. Keep it up, and we appreciate you spending some of your Monday night with us tonight.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me on, and as always, go Big Red.
There he is, Jeremiah Searles, joining us on our Sports Nightly Hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto Family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. All right, phone lines are open. Whatever you'd like to talk about, your thoughts about college football. Pessimistic, optimistic, fingers crossed, what do you think? 866-HUSKER-1, 866-487-5371. Tim will rejoin me next.
You're listening to Sports Nightly. This
5371, the number if you want to dial us up with a comment or question. Greg Sharp, Tim Curran with you here on a Monday night of Sports Nightly. How was your weekend? What'd you do? Anything fun?
I mean, not quite. I got a little baseball. Apparently the last remaining baseball we may or may not watch in the foreseeable future. Hit the gym. That was also not fun. That was a very, very painful session. But no, not too much. Not too much.
Man. Come on, you're young, single. You need to get out and live life a little bit here, Tim. Come on.
I'm self-quarantining, Greg. I'm just trying to be a responsible citizen. I mean, what else can you do?
Well, yeah. I mean, but there's no law that says you can't go for walks, you can't go jog, you can't go.
Why went for a walk? Who said I didn't go for a walk?
Visit a park?
I went for a walk. I did not visit a park, I'm afraid. I had plenty of reason to. I've recently taken up, like, I bought that Hamilton. I'll use this for our lovely video watchers. I bought this massive Hamilton biography, 700 pages. I'm trying to get through it. So far, I'm on page 200. Haven't read it in like a week, so we'll see how that goes. But anyway,
you will then probably dispute some of the verbiage of the play Hamilton, because I'm told that it's not overly historical accurate, that there'll be some things you go, that's not what the biography says about it.
It's actually pretty accurate. There's a couple small things, like Angelica Schuyler's sister-in-law was already married when they met. They kind of make it like there's like some love triangle in the play. That really wasn't a thing. And then I think that the famous duel between Aaron Burr and Hamilton actually occurred in 1804 in real life, but in the play it was in 1800. But it's actually pretty spot on. Now, I don't know if the Founding Fathers actually broke out into song and dance and rap. That might still have to be up for debate. But no, I think for the most part, it's actually fairly accurate.
Yeah, I think that's what most people say. For the most part, it is. It's like anything with Hollywood, right? I mean, anytime Hollywood takes a book or a biography,
dramatic license.
Yeah, they stretch it, they make it, they try to add like maybe a romantic part to it just to get tug at the heartstrings of the audience a little bit. You're like, that really didn't happen that way, but Hollywood can drum that up a little bit. That's usually the way those things work.
Yeah, it is. I mean, but hey, if you haven't seen it yet, Greg, I would definitely recommend it. 2.5 hours of basically guys rapping about social studies. It's amazing.
I've seen it live.
Oh, well, you have that over me. Well, look at you. I mean, you're already more cultured than me.
It was at the Orpheum up in Omaha a year ago. I saw it then. I've not watched the one on Disney Plus. My daughters have seen it again there, but yeah, I watched it live. 866-HUSKER-1, 866-487-5371. Let's head to the phones. Go to Omaha and Mike. Good evening, Mike. Welcome to Sports Nightly.
Yeah, I got to agree with Tom Chattel about that split season. I mean, we've talked a couple times about it, and you seem to like it too. And I've been watching spring football for years. It gets physical. They just play one meaningless game, but it's a physical game except for the quarterbacks, right? And so you play 3 or 4. And let me tell you something. For each game you switch from the fall to the spring, the financial implications could be enormous. I mean, Rutgers has already said they're not going to have any fans there. Not that they have many anyway, but all this news on the vaccine is great. And it could be by the spring, things are kind of back to normal. And that would be huge financially, don't you think?
Could be. Did you hear Jeremiah's comments about that from a player's perspective? He said there's just no way you could put your body through a handful of games in the spring and then come back next fall and play a full season.
Yeah. Do you really believe that? I mean,
yeah.
They get ready for spring in college.
But
3 or 4 or 5 games.
Mike, spring football, they have, 15 practices? They're not allowed to even put pads on for the first 3 or 4. So they might have 7 or 8 where they really hit in spring, maybe have 1 scrimmage, 2 scrimmages, and then the main game. That'd be a lot different than playing 4 or 5 games and getting ready for 4 or 5 games during the week. That's a big, big difference. I mean, I hear what you're saying about finance and all that stuff, but I just, at what point does the student-athlete's health come into it? No, mic dropped. I mean, Jeremiah brought up some great points about that, Tim. I mean, these guys, and like he said, a lot of them, if they have a chance to go pro, are probably going to sit out if you have to play games in February, March, and April.
Right, and I also liked what Jeremiah said. It's almost like if you're going to commit to playing, you might as well just get those games in, because if you're going to play and you only play 5 or 6 games and just pick up the rest of the season later, it just seems kind of like a bit counterintuitive. And also, like you said, there is a physical standpoint to it where it's very difficult to justify playing 4 or 5 games in the spring, then turn around in less than 1 calendar year and say, okay, play a full season. And that takes a toll, especially with guys who are technically amateur athletes. You don't want to necessarily put that burden on them if they're especially not there being paid millions of dollars like guys in the NFL are. So to me, it seems it's a little bit of a long shot. I can understand why it sounds appealing, and the revenue point is fair taken. Some programs are going to do a lot better than others, but obviously you're any way you try and play football, whether that's in the spring or the fall, there's going to be some loss of revenue or probably limited capacity. But, I mean, yeah, you're right. It's about putting the student-athlete's safety first and not just trying to get in as many games as you can. And plus, as Mike said, he seemed to be hopeful there would be a vaccine ready. Well, I hope so, but you can't really rely on that. So what if stuff's still bad in the spring? Then what? So It doesn't really – it's not a foolproof plan by any stretch.
That's been my thing. Everybody said, well, it's easy. Just move everything to the spring. Well, we don't know. It may not be any better in the spring than it is right now. So you at least have time on your hands now, or if you can get 5, 6 games, that might be it. That might be all you get in. In fact, I think if you told athletic directors right now, we can get you 6 games this fall, they would sign up immediately and say, absolutely, give me that. We can deal with the rest of it. We'll move on from there. But and Mike's referencing Tom Chattel's column over the weekend, and we have talked about this from time to time. But I lean with Jeremiah that if you wanted to maybe play 2 games in the spring, maybe you could do that. But Tom Chattel's saying play 4 or 5. I just don't think you can ask that of your student athletes and have them come back in August and get ready for next year.
Right. It's asking way too much. And again, I understand from a fan perspective, and also an athletic director perspective, you would want any way possible to see this season play out, but splitting it up half and half. And also, that's a significant gap. I mean, I know I've heard the idea floated out, maybe they play the bowl games in the spring, but by that point, it's almost like the ship has sailed. And plus, there are guys who graduate in December, and then they can take off. So it's just difficult to justify.
You have the incoming freshmen. A lot of them are now showing up second semester of their senior year of high school to get started and get going. You'd have a crossover of that. I think the best chance is try to get some games in here in the fall. I know the Big Ten's going to put out some schedule probably this week that lists 10. That's probably overly optimistic. So get a couple in here in the fall and move on. Mike was talking about the vaccines. The first vaccine that entered phase 3 in effect today in the United States. They're going to put it into 30,000 test patients. They're giving the first dose today, tomorrow, and then they have to wait, I think, 4 weeks before they give the second dose. But if that works and that's promising, you've got drug companies that say they can have 1 billion vaccinations ready by the 1st of January. That's great news, and I hope they're right and I hope that's successful.
Yeah, I mean, it's a best case scenario type deal, and we've been fortunate that you've seen some stuff in the news about these companies getting ready to roll out this testing, but obviously vaccines at any stage, especially this early, they can still be risks. So what if you have people say, "Oh, I don't know about using this vaccine in this stage," but it's still a promising sign. I mean, there are plenty of diseases and viruses that never get a vaccine, so the fact that there's already one that seems this close to development is actually really, really promising. And even the way that treatment has gotten better, deaths deaths. The coronavirus is still spiking some area of this country, but deaths aren't going out of control. So that's a good thing. It seems that treatment has gotten better even in the short time we've had to deal with the virus.
Yeah. 866-HUSKER-1, 866-487-5371. Back with more of Sports Nightly next.
You're listening to Sports Nightly.
866-HUSKER-1, 866-487-5371. The number if you want to dial us up with a comment or question. Greg Sharp, Tim Curran with you. So you watched a little baseball over the weekend. Did you flip over and watch any NBA? I guess maybe you don't get NBA TV.
No, I watched some highlight breakdowns for 30 seconds before I lost interest. I still am not. I mean, because they're still in the exhibition stage. I think the first real game is the 30th, so maybe
Friday.
then. But I'm not
Friday
ready
the
to. I'm not ready to dive fully into NBA scrimmage bubble basketball. Maybe in fact, that's probably going to be the only thing going on if the Marlins have any say with it.
Man,
so maybe
you're ready to pull the plug on baseball.
No.
Baseball's not going to stop, Tim. They're not going to stop. They're going to keep playing.
Believe me, I don't want it to, because then we're all just going to be accepting the NBA as our new Lord and Savior into our lives. I'm not necessarily willing to do that. Believe me, there's no one that wants MLB more than me.
I could not believe Twitter today. People said baseball is finished. I'm like, why? Because one team had 10 positives? The guys will be back in 10 days. They'll be fine.
From a journalistic perspective, it's a little bit precarious because I saw one blue checkmark Twitter journo saying, "Oh, the season the word I keep on hearing from my sources is in jeopardy. It's in jeopardy." It's like, well, until you have something hard, maybe wait until you report that instead of just sending out the panic. Now, of course, here I am. I'm stirring the pot on this program here. That's just me being my cynical self. But I'm not a journalist. I don't have Rob Manfred's ear. I'm not. This is not me with any inside knowledge. I don't know. It's just me being.
If in a week 10 teams have this kind of an outbreak, then you may have to pause it. But you got one team that's had a break, and that's why they're carrying 60-man camps so that they can put guys in and get through a 10-day period of time. So I couldn't. No, I shouldn't say I couldn't believe it. I can believe it because that's kind of what it's turned into. And really, Twitter's there's a lot of that. Twitter gets into the going where they're mass panic just goes up in a hurry because I think it probably gets clicks for guys because they go into mass panic mode. But games going on tonight. 2 did get postponed because of the Marlins situation. You got a couple rain issues going on in Cleveland and Cincinnati tonight. Great to hear from Jeremiah Searles. Love that guy. Glad he's part of our team here at Husker Sports. Again, you'll have Tommy Armstrong this week for the sit-down Husker Huddle on Wednesday night. Our Sports Nightly Hotline brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto Family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. This has been an hour here on Sports Nightly.
Your team. Your show. This is Sports Nightly.
Lejean in at quarterback for Maryland. Looking at 3rd and 9 out with 30-yard line. Lejean gets the snap. Gets hit, dropped. Oh, what a sack. Big-time hit by JoJo Doman back at the 21-yard line. Doman's second sack of the year.
Now, let's check the pulse of Husker Nation with your hosts, Greg Sharp and Tim Curran.
Here we are, hour number 2 of our Monday show. Hope you had a good weekend. Thank you so much for spending some of your Monday night with us. We're delighted to have you on board here with us. Big hour coming up. We're going to begin tonight our series of reports of around the Big Ten. Check in with each campus as workouts begin. The, quote, OTAs have started across the country. You do have a couple of Big Ten schools that aren't going right now with workouts. Michigan State and Rutgers have both delayed, hit the pause button on their workouts because of some positive tests. I think Michigan State had 2 staff members and a player test positive on Friday, so they halted their workouts. But for the most part, everybody in the league going through some workouts. August is 7th, the first day for full practices. So our round the Big Ten reports begin here tonight. We'll also continue our preseason top 25 countdown. We've made it up to our top 20. We did 21 through 25 last week, number 20. Tonight we'll reveal that for you a little bit later on in the hour. And also at the end of the hour, we'll have our winners from the weekend. See what Tim and Austin have come up with for their winners. We'll have that for you later on in the hour. But tonight we begin our Around the Big Ten segments.
Tonight, we take a look around the Big Ten Conference. Brought to you by Sinclair Oil Gasoline and Oil Products. Fill up your life and your vehicle with DynoCare, Sinclair's top-tier gasoline.
Fields looks, throws, middle of the field, toward the end zone, touchdown, Olave! 27 yards.
He dodges a guy at the 1 and jumps into the end zone. Touchdown, Michigan!
Touchdown, touchdown, Iowa. Stanley to Amir Smith.
20, 10, touchdown! Touchdown, Illinois!
20, Cone to the 10, Cone to the 5, Cone, touchdown, Wisconsin!
Tonight,
Daru in motion, an empty backfield. Plummer waits for the snap, and he's back to throw. Steps up, throws deep over the middle. Caught! Touchdown! David Bell with the touchdown catch. He took a big hit as he brought it in, but David Bell gets the touchdown, his second of the season, and the Boilermakers draw first blood.
the Purdue Boilermakers.
Check out what's going on with Purdue and Mike Carmen of the Journal-Courier, who's been preparing all day long, apparently, to be on Sports Athlete tonight. We appreciate that. Mike, how you doing? Are you hanging in there?
Yeah, I take every assignment seriously.
Give me the latest. What's going on there? Have they had major infections, or what? Are they practicing, doing their little 20-hour week? What's the latest with Purdue football?
Well, they are practicing. They've moved, like most programs, to the next part of what the NCAA allows, and they're just kind of, plugging along. They've Purdue announced last week within the athletic department it's had 27 positive tests from June 8th and through last week. So, people are testing positive here and there, but it hasn't really derailed anything football or any of the other sports are doing, other than the people that test positive have to sit out, quarantine, and then get back after it after that time's up.
Mike, to your knowledge, have any of the 27 positives required hospitalizations?
No, Purdue made that clear in its release that none of the cases have resulted in any hospital stays.
Oh, that's good. All right, here we go. The last year, I know, was a disappointing season for Purdue. There were obviously reasons for it. Injuries. Rondale Moore's injury certainly derailed the team a little bit. They had injuries at quarterback. Kind of a reset button for Coach Braum, wasn't it, after last season?
Yeah, I mean they're trying to stay healthy, number one, and get their big guns on the field. Rondale Moore is the big gun, and another big gun emerged last year with David Bell. So you've got two guys that they want on the field together. And as I went back and looked at last year, Bell and Moore were on the field a combined 96 plays last year in the first 3.5 games. That's not a lot when you're looking at a full season. So they need to get them on the field at the same time to really put some pressure on defenses. Then they have to figure out who's going to be their starting quarterback, or will multiple quarterbacks play this year, because they have added a graduate transfer from UCLA, Austin Burton, to go along with Jack Plummer and Aiden O'Connell. So once camp gets going, and once everybody knows what's going to happen this season, what happens at the quarterback position is going to be a big deal at Purdue again.
Can they find a running game to help balance that offense at all? What's the status of the running game in your eyes?
It needs to take a step forward. They were just young in the backfield last year, but also a lot of inexperience on the offensive line played a role in that as well. They've got most of their line coming back. They're scheduled to add a graduate transfer, Greg Long from UTEP, but he's had some injury issues throughout his career. I think ideally they would like to see him play right tackle if they can get that out of him. But Grant Hermans has been a pretty good anchor on the left side at the tackle spot. But the offensive line needs to take a step forward. And King Daru, led the team in rushing last year as a true freshman. He needs to be a little bit better, but also they need some other backs to step up and provide some more spark out of the backfield.
Again, visiting with Mike Carmen of the Journal-Courier. We begin tonight our Around the Big Ten report, starting with the Purdue Boilermakers. The other huge news in the offseason was Bob Diaco being hired as the new defensive coordinator for Purdue. He was here for the final year of the Mike Riley era of Nebraska. What kind of impression has Coach Diaco made early on?
Well, probably a lot. We didn't get to see a whole lot of spring practice, and they were only able to get 8 practices in, but in the parts that we saw, there was a 3-4 being thrown around. They claim they'll go back and forth between a 3-4 and a 4-3, and regardless of what scheme they're in or alignment they're in, George Karlaftis had a nice freshman year for Purdue off the edge, and I think he's poised to do it again. Probably the biggest key for Purdue defensively and how Bob is going to use Lorenzo Neal. Didn't play at all last year. Had suffered a knee injury at the end of the 2018 season. Didn't get on the field last year. May have re-injured something late in the year during practice, but if they can get him back healthy at the nose guard spot or the defensive tackle spot, that will be a big bonus for Purdue, because the last couple of years they've really struggled in getting some pressure on the quarterback and getting in the backfield and producing enough negative plays back there.
It looks to me like, Mike, that front seven, if he's healthy, and Karlaftis certainly is an all-conference type of player, that front seven could be pretty salty.
Could be. They're thin at linebacker. Derek Barnes will probably move from the in spot that he played last year and half of the year before that back to his natural position of middle linebacker. They've added a junior college transfer, DeMarcus Mitchell, big guy who can play linebacker but also can come off the edge. And they've shifted a safety, Jalen Graham, down to an outside linebacker spot, giving them a little bit more athletic ability at that place, and probably a hybrid guy that can come off the edge, but also help you in the pass game. So there's some talent there. Is it going to mesh with what Bob Diaco wants to do, and how does he utilize that personnel?
Well, when the schedule was set a month ago, Purdue was going to come to Lincoln to begin the season. We've still not seen an official release from the conference. How much do you think they'll mix things up, or do you think they'll leave kind of the blueprint that they had in place? What's your best guess?
My best guess is they'll probably tear it up and start over. It would probably make sense to do that, because my personal opinion is going to start if we're going to get to the end of the season. So I'm in favor of trying to get as many of your marquee matchups, your rivalry games into September and early October, just so those games are played. They're the best games the conference usually offers, like Michigan, Ohio State, Purdue, Indiana, so Nebraska, Iowa. I just think they'll probably start over, put together a schedule that, creates a lot of flexibility over 3 months, and then just kind of roll it out and see if the Big Ten or any other conference can get to the finish line at that point.
Yeah, we're all just in a guessing game right now. Mike, always great to catch up. Thank you so much for being a part of this one. Let's hope we have some real football here in about 6 weeks.
Thank you for having me.
We've got Mike Carmen of the Journal-Courier with us here, breaking down the Purdue Boilermakers. And Tim, you look at this team, and they got parts, but they certainly have question marks as you look up and down this roster.
Right, especially at defense with Bobby D, a name that, of course, Husker fans will be familiar with, taking over. You like what they have at receiver, and Rondale Moore and also David Bell, but at offensive line might be a little bit more of a question mark, and I'm not really sure. I mean, they desperately need a bounce-back year, but, people are pretty confident in Jeff Brom. I mean, it's funny, Jeff Brom is you almost hear him compared to Scott Frost all the time. They're both offensive minds, and he almost jumped ship to Louisville, but decided to stick around, and things didn't go that great. Now, at quarterback, that's going to be the biggest, most interesting thing. It'll either be Jack Plummer, Aiden Connell, or Austin Burton, and they might go with Austin Burton just because he had that one really, really great game last year. I know Plummer actually did end up getting benched, I believe, against Illinois. So Purdue is a weird team to me, because they could either you could see him having kind of a flame out like they did last year, or you could see him having an amazing season. I'm not really too sure where that'll go right now, but their defense, if they can get that figured out, if Bob Diaco works his magic, then who knows? We might see the Boilermakers make some noise this season.
You know, he's had Coach Frost's number. I mean, Coach Brom's 2-0 against the Huskers since Coach Frost came here. Nebraska certainly felt like they let one get away last year at West Lafayette. Nebraska had double-digit leads a couple times in that game and couldn't deliver a knockout blow. That was one of the more frustrating games. But selfishly, I would, with the question mark at quarterback, new defensive coordinator, I'm hoping they leave it alone and let that be the opening game for Nebraska to play Purdue. I think that would be a good time to play them right out of the gate before they kind of get settled in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the best time. I mean, if you go back to last year at Nebraska, they never really got out of third gear when they played South Alabama, and so there's going to be a little bit on both sides where both teams are kind of knocking the dust off. But really, it'll be an interesting gauge to see how Purdue's season will go. If they can do good against dear old Nebraska U, then that would bode well. And they had a really interesting non-con. Of course, that's not going to happen anymore, but they would have played Memphis, they would have played Air Force and Boston College in there. So that actually might be really beneficial for Purdue that they got some of those games canceled, because Memphis is a scary team to play and Air Force are no joke either. So, yeah, Nebraska and Purdue, we're set to start anyway, and they're two teams that, like you were saying, Greg, they're similar in a lot of ways, both offensively minded, and Bob Diaco's return. Unfortunately, we won't know how the fans will probably not wouldn't know how they would treat his reunion, but hey, it'll still be an interesting matchup, and I'm crossing my fingers. We haven't seen the schedule yet, but I'm hoping that still maintains course.
All right, there's Mike Carmen as our first around the Big Ten breakout with the Purdue Boilermakers. We'll have another one for you coming up on Wednesday night show. When we come back, we'll continue our preseason top 25 countdown. Number 20 headed your way next.
You're listening to
It's the Sports Nightly preseason top 25 tonight.
Daniels is rolling, looking for a downfield shot, lofts it to Darby, that is not deep, and dances into the end zone. What a throw by the freshman.
Number 20, the Arizona State Sun Devils.
And here to tell us all about the Sun Devils is Doug Haller from The Athletic. Doug, we appreciate you coming on here. A lot of optimism has to be for ASU football. Herm Edwards has got this thing going in the right direction, doesn't he?
Hey, yeah, he does. It's year 3 under Herm, and as everyone remembers, the hire was not universally applauded. So, that first season he made some progress. Last year a little bit more, and this year they have a lot of things lined up for him to take that next step, and they're hoping to contend in the Pac-12.
Tell me about the shakeup on the coaching staff. He changes both coordinators after last year.
Yeah, well, the offense, you could kind of see that coming. Rob Likens was the previous coordinator, and he was on the previous staff under Todd Graham. And when they made the coaching change at the quarterback at that time, Manning Wilkins had had a different coordinator every year he had been there. So they wanted, just for the sake of continuity, they wanted to keep somebody, a familiar face, so they promoted Rob Likens from receivers coach to offensive coordinator, and it just wasn't a good fit, and not all of that was Rob's fault, because, last year they had an offensive line that they started 2 true freshmen, so it was really difficult. They started a true freshman quarterback as well. But they only averaged about 25 points a game, and that's just not going to cut it if you're going to contend for a conference title. So they made a change there and brought in Zach Hill from Boise State. Everyone kind of knows Boise State's reputation as far as being creative with what they do offensively, and that's what they're hoping to do there. And then defensively, they lost their defensive coordinator, Danny Gonzalez. He left to become the head coach at his alma mater, New Mexico, and that was something that I think people could see coming. Danny was very well respected within the athletic department, but ASU had a pretty good fallback plan. They promoted Antonio Pierce, was the linebackers coach, former NFL linebacker, did some great things in the NFL, played in the Pro Bowl, won a Super Bowl. And then they also have this guy by the name of Marvin Lewis, who coached in the NFL for nearly 2 decades. He was an analyst or an advisor to Herm Edwards last year. They made him co-defensive coordinator as well. So they have 2 guys there. They're changing up the scheme a little bit, but as far as football knowledge and expertise, there's definitely no fall off there.
It's an NFL-type staff with those 2 guys on there. Jaden Daniels was terrific last year. Doug, tell our audience a little about him, and where do you think he can still grow as a quarterback?
Well, I mean, everybody kind of knew. He came in. He was rated, I think, as like the number 2 dual threat quarterback in high school his senior year. Put up just crazy video game type numbers. Everyone knew he would get a chance to start, and it didn't take long when he was here for spring ball as a true freshman. He enrolled early that he was probably going to be the guy. But everyone expected growing pains, and to be honest, there weren't many. I think in the second game of the season at Michigan State, that's a pretty, as your listeners know, that's a pretty crazy environment. He leads the game-winning touchdown in the final minutes, and that was the first sign that the kid was different. He just doesn't react negatively to pressure, and for someone that young, that was pretty impressive. He led Arizona State to 3 comeback wins like that: one against Michigan State, one against Cal, one against Washington State. He made probably the play of Arizona State's season against number 6 Oregon that knocked Oregon out of the playoff race there late in the season, 3rd and 16 through a pass down the sideline to their top receiver, Brandon Ayuk. Just really poised. Through 17 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions, doesn't make many mistakes. Where he can be better is his accuracy. He wasn't – some of the, short to intermediate throws he needs to be a little bit better at. The deep ball, he's pretty good. And then just, choosing to use his legs. I mean, he can do that. Last year they kind of, didn't want him to do it as much because they really tried to keep him from taking big hits. They were trying to be really protective of him. But that's an element that they want him to showcase a little bit more this year, and I think we'll see him add that to his game.
Again, visiting with Doug Haller from The Athletic, talking about Arizona State. We have the Sun Devils at number 20 in our preseason top 25. Okay, Daniel's back, but top receivers, a couple of top 2 or 3 are gone. Benjamin is gone from that backfield. What about the weapons around Daniels?
Yeah, that's a question mark. Yeah, they do have talent. It's young talent. They brought in 2 4-star running backs, DeMonte Traynham from Ohio and Daniel Nagata from California. Very talented. We're here for the spring, but they're freshmen. And, the receiver position is very similar as well. They do have a kid by the name of Frank Darby, who's a senior, who's a big play threat. He averaged almost 20 yards per catch last year, which ranked 10th nationally. He's really good at getting behind the defense and making plays there. Is he as well-rounded as Brandon Ayuk was? Brandon Ayuk was a first-round draft pick. Probably not. But he is a weapon. He is dangerous. And then, they have a lot of youth. They signed 4 kids who were top 100 receivers last year in high school. But, it just depends on if they're ready to make the jump. None of those 4 were here for spring. ASU was among the fortunate schools. They got in 7 spring practices before everything was shut down. In the new offense they're running, it's a little bit different, and the receivers have a little bit more responsibility. So it really is going to depend on whether or not they can pick up those things. But, when you lose Eno Benjamin, who's one of the best rushers in school history, when you lose a receiver who's a first-round draft pick, that without question is a concern, replacing those guys.
Doug, let's talk defense a little bit. How will the adaptation from the 3-4 to the 4-3 work in your eyes, and what kind of stars are on that side of the ball for the Sun Devils?
Well, they're going from a 3-3-5 to a 4-3, which is more of a traditional scheme, of course, and that's what Marvin Lewis and Antonio Pierce. That's kind of their background. They returned 8 starters from last year. They have a group of guys that they started as true freshmen in Herm's first year, and this is their 3rd year now. So they're past that kind of learning phase, and now it's time for them to kind of step up and be, maybe not all Pac-12 caliber players, but closer to that level. So they're expecting big things. The big thing for Arizona State on that end, their corners are solid. They have a 4-year starter on one side. They have a former 5-star high school prospect on the other. Their linebackers are good. Their back end is solid. It's just going to depend on the pass rush. Last year they played Colorado, and they didn't get. I remember standing next to the Colorado's quarterback, Steven Montez, at the end of the game, walking off the field. I noticed he didn't have he had a white uniform on. He didn't have one grass stain anywhere.
Wow.
So I took a picture of it. I went back and I watched the game again. They didn't touch him one time. Not one time did they lay any hand on the quarterback. And he picked them apart. And that's the big thing. If they can find a way to get pressure on the quarterback, they should be pretty good. They think they have the corners that can allow them to play man coverage, so that could help out there. But that's really their big question mark, is if they can find a pass rusher that can just cause problems.
Okay, the Pac-12, like the Big Ten, is not going to play non-con. Any idea, is the schedule out yet? Do the schools have it? I know they're looking at the 19th of September to start. Has the schedule been officially released?
It has not. They're thinking about the last thing that they announced is that they were hopeful that it would be announced by the end of this month. There have been reports that have leaked that said they're looking at, a 10-game schedule, adding one more game to what they already have. So, I think everyone's just kind of in wait-and-see mode to see, if even that gets changed. But I do think that they'll probably announce something soon. It sounds like it'll be a 10-game schedule. We should know, I would think, maybe by the end of this week, and hopefully we will. But who knows? As you guys know, this thing seems to change week by week.
Oh, hour by hour. Have the Sun Devils stayed healthy? Has the virus made its way through the team at all? Have they been very transparent with what's going on with testing?
They have not. They before they started voluntary workouts in June. They had like a Zoom call with the media and kind of explained what their procedures were as far as bringing back players, how they were going to phase them in as a team. Their protocol for being in the facility, having masks on all times, coming in the same door, walking the same way to the locker room, to the weight room, no lingering, leaving out the same door. Their key cards to the facility don't even work anymore, so it's not like they can just come and go as they please. So they have, from everything they said from the get-go, it sounded pretty impressive that they were, taking this seriously and they had a pretty good plan in place. ASU is one of the schools that do not release any testing information whatsoever. Have they been totally clean? Probably not. Arizona is a state that's really had cases spike here in the last month. But as far as how bad it's been, I can't answer that.
Well, Doug, as we sat down and put together our top 25, we really see it as kind of a battle between ASU and USC for this South Division title. Is that how you would handicap it?
Yeah, and I would probably give USC just, the slight edge right now. Just based on what they have returning. And another thing I didn't mention with Arizona State is the offensive line. Last year was probably the worst in the Pac-12. This year they went and got a couple of grad transfers, one from Texas A&M, Kellen Deesh, who didn't start, but they didn't waste any time in spring putting him at left tackle. They have really high hopes for him. And then Henry Haddis is another guy. He's a Stanford grad transfer. He did start before he got hurt last season. So they feel like they've upgraded their offensive line. But that's kind of, the offense and defensive line is kind of the question marks I have, which is why I would give them, put them just slightly behind USC. But I do think, I think Jaden Daniels is a special talent, and obviously everything, especially in the preseason, starts with the quarterback. So, I would put them right there as the contenders in the Pac-12.
Yeah, very good. Doug, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. Hopefully we're covering games here in about 6 weeks.
I hope so. I appreciate you having me.
You bet. Thanks. Doug Howder with The Athletic joining us on our Sports Nightly Hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto Family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. All right, Tim Curran, what are your thoughts about ASU, our team number 20?
Yeah, ASU is poised to have, I think, a really, really good season, and not to mention likely due to one man, and that's Jaden Daniels. Nearly 3,000 yards last year, 17 touchdowns, and just 2 INTs. That ain't bad. And as Doug was talking about, it was kind of funny how much snark and cynicism was surrounded that Herm Edwards hire, and I think a lot of people probably owe him an apology now. Now, they haven't won the division quite yet, so there's still to get there, but last year they had 8 wins, including a bowl win against Florida State, so that's a decent job. And really, minus some years of the Bruce Snyder era. Really, Arizona State, to me, they're kind of like a sleeping giant. They really, I think, have the opportunity and potential to be a whole lot better. And this year, as Doug was breaking down, it's going to be USC, and that's, I believe, their first game, at least as of for right now, against the Trojans. They get past them. I don't really see who's going to slow them down. But as he mentioned, there's a couple things on running back. You have a little bit of a situation there where you're looking to replace some guys, and then at wide receiver, you don't have Brandon Ayuk anymore, and those are some all Pac-12 guys. So they're going to need some guys to step up in a few places, and on defense is going to be really, really interesting. And in fact, on both sides of the ball, they have new coordinators. You're going to have Marvin Lewis on defense, who's co-coordinating with an assistant that just got promoted, and also on offense, they got a guy from Boise State, Zach Hill, to call things, and then you throw COVID in the mix, and all of a sudden you have two new coordinators installing new systems, and then you have the camps being kind of shortened and having to do quarantine, stuff like that with coronavirus, and then you have the cancellation of non-cons, and you have this really interesting scenario here where you're really not going to have any forgiveness. I mean, you don't have those non-con games to kind of warm up. You're kind of throwing right into the meat grinder against USC. So I'll be curious to see. I know producer Brett was very confident in our top 25 choices, and the more I look at it, the more I kind of anguish over, did we really get this right? Is Arizona State, what happens if they implode or Jane Daniels goes down? So we'll see. I think they have a lot in place to have a really good season, but there's a lot new that they're trying to install, and so it'll be interesting to see.
It sure looks different when you look at a schedule for a team like ASU and you take away the 3 non-conference games, because as we go back and look at their old schedule, we definitely had them 3-0 with some momentum going to USC, and then you'll probably losing that game, but then maybe getting on a little bit of a run after that as well. And so if we had gone back and redone these after the Big Ten and the Pac-12 dumped those non-conference games, I think our top 25 would have looked different, but we had to put it together before those announcements came out.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the tough thing. We're sticking by our rankings. At least I know I am. Yep. We are. That's how the integrity works. But I think winning the Pac-12 South is an achievable goal. They have everything in place. They have those grad transfers in O-line, which will help them a lot. Running a 4-3, a more traditional setup. They also have the Pac-12's leading tackler coming back, or Jermaine Lowell. They got Frank Darby, who's a fantastic senior wide receiver. So they have all the talent there. But as you mentioned, I mean, so long as if they can get past USC, I don't see a problem. But if they lose to USC, how quickly can they bounce back? Because last year they had a really strange stretch where I think they lost like 4 straight. They dropped games to Colorado and UCLA. So if they can avoid that, obviously, I think, and they have the talent to avoid that this season, I think they'll be in tip-top shape.
There you go. ASU, our team number 20 in our preseason top 25. Tough weekend for some big frontline pitchers, Tim. Justin Verlander, they're going to shut him down for a couple weeks. Corey Kluber with the Texas Rangers only threw an inning, then he felt tightness. He came out of the game for the Rangers. Those are some big-name guys who've already had some arm issues. You kind of wonder, with the the 2-week summer camp, did that allow these guys to really get themselves and their arms in shape to go out and throw against big league batters?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and I'm sure that has something to do with it, and obviously with players down the road who might randomly get COVID or other bugs and bumps that pick up. I mean, you're going to be dealing with a lot of rosters and teams kind of adjusting things on the fly, and that's going to be just part of the way this season will work. Is you have a basically 60-game schedule. You're trying to jam all these games in, and you're doing quick turnarounds, and guys maybe getting hurt and having to go to the taxi squad and all this stuff. And I don't really envy any of these Major League Baseball organizations right now, not at all. Luckily, the best pitcher in all of baseball, Adam Wainwright, is still going strong. So Cardinals have that star power to lean on.
We mentioned this in hour one of the program, that the NFL camps are starting to get going. Today you've had some rookies who've tested positive. They've gone on the COVID list for NFL teams, including the Vikings' #1 pick. We did not talk about this Friday, that the Washington football team is going to be known as the Washington football team for this year. How does that make you feel?
They have like the same creative ability as I do. That's what I would name a football franchise as, the Washington football team. I understand in the current climate, I guess, so to speak, that they felt the need to change the name. And I suppose you don't want to just rush and change the name in a weekend and a fortnight. At the same time, I think that if you were to put together a couple of those executive heads, you would be able to come up with something. But names are hard. I mean, I remember when the Omaha Royals were changed to the Storm Chasers, they had some focus group get together. In this focus group, they were paid untold amounts of money to come up with, wow, well, people really like to talk about the weather, so let's call them the Storm Chasers.
Yeah.
It's like that. And Omaha's was right there, and they skipped over it because they came to the dramatic conclusion that people like to talk about the weather. So I don't really know what the name-changing industry looks like. I don't know if they're going to do a focus group and they do that same old song and dance. The Washington football team, I mean, I don't know. It's a name. It's the most generic name in all of sports. It's no Seattle Kraken. It's no Hong Kong Cthulhu's. I know that. But if they need someone to jog the old idea machine, then my phone line's open anytime. I can give them a few ideas.
In this day and age of social media and people trying to connect with their fan bases via social media, why not kind of hand it off to the fans? Come up with like the 3 or 4 finalists, put it to a vote of the fans, or have people submit their ideas online. Then you have a group that picks 3 or 4, and then you vote on. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways they could be creative and get their fans involved in this thing. But it just seems like they're just going to kind of push back and say, "We'll deal with this in 6 months or something," right?
Well. Yeah, crowdsourcing has its pitfalls, too, because remember the Bodie McBoatface incident where they named that submarine research vessel. And there's also, if you really let them go wild, I'm sure that if the dark corners of the internet got their hands on it, there would be some very offensive names. But, at least you give a list. Say, hey, here are 4 names.
Right.
What do you guys like? You throw it out there. But, yeah, it just seems like the Washington football team is like, let's just have the most safe, fence-sitting, most generic name possible. And it just seems like they kind of wave the white flag a little bit. They just kind of signal defeat. There's something they could do that's better than Washington football team.
Right, and they've got 5-6 weeks before the season starts to get there. Sounds like they're keeping the same colors. They're not going to change their franchise's colors, which that's fine. It's okay to do that, but yeah, to me, it's just like throw your arms up. We don't, whatever. I mean, that just seems like a bad way to run it. But they didn't call and ask me.
Right, and the branding, I understand from perspective, the branding is very difficult to get done. If you did a total relaunch of the name before the season start, you'd have to get the uniforms out there and all the other merchandise stuff that we're not even really thinking about, all their, team mugs and stuff like that. But to me, it signals a little bit of a defeat. They've waved the white flag, and that organization, I mean, Daniel Snyder, there might not be a more reviled owner in all of NFL in a league that includes Jerry Jones. So Daniel Snyder is impressive in that regard, and that he seems to be the most loathed owner in all of sports, and that is a very, very tough thing to do.
I don't know if he's in all of sports. I think he definitely would be in the NFL, right? I mean, yes. I don't know that anybody's close. Maybe Jerry Jones. Jerry doesn't bother me. That's fine. He's okay. I don't know a lot of people like your boy Kraft in New England, but he doesn't bother me either.
I mean, well, if you don't like your cheese, those beautiful Kraft singles, then I'm not sure if you're really living life.
Al Davis would have been in that discussion, but he's no longer living, and I don't think anybody has a lot of animosity to his son, who now is running that franchise. So
maybe not the hair.
It's probably you're right. It's probably Daniel Snyder by a long shot in the NFL. But we could probably find New York Knicks fans in the NBA might argue with you. I don't think they're a big fan of Dolan, their owner, but. There's some bad
Greg,
ones
I think
around.
we have a new top 10 idea. Top 10 most loathed owners in all of sports.
You know what? I think we did that. I think we did. Austin, didn't we? I think we did a bad owners top 10 list.
It would have been, I think, last summer we pulled that one out.
Yeah. So Tim, you got to keep Tim. Folks is in charge of coming, since he hasn't done a top 10 Tuesday like in months. Austin and I have put him in charge of coming up with tomorrow night's topic.
I'm just trying to shirk responsibility any way I do. I thought I had a brain blast there, but maybe
Almost.
Top 10 names for the Redskins. Pardon me, top 10 names the Washington football team should adopt. And we just come up with some some out-of-the-box ideas. Send it off to Daniel Snyder, see what he has to say.
Austin and I will talk and see if we agree to that. All right, we need to take a break. We'll come back with our weekend winners coming up next.
You're listening to Sports Nightly. This is the Husker Sports Network.
Hey, what's this new game everyone's talking about? Mega Onions.
Mega Millions?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, not new. Been around for quite a while.
I heard you can win $1 million.
Actually, the starting jackpot is $40 million.
Dollars?
Yeah.
Oh, my. Hey, tell me about this magic fryer.
Megaplier.
Yes, that's it.
Add the Megaplier for $1, and you can multiply your prize up to 5 times.
Great. I'll have one of those Picky Wicks.
Quick pick?
Yeah, that's the one.
Don't know about Mega Millions? You don't know what you're missing. Top prize odds 1 in 302 million.
Did you ever buy something and get more than you expected? Emeritus offers insurance, employee benefits, and financial services, but we deliver so much more. The comfort of a human voice when you need it. The confidence of flashing a beautiful smile, the relief that your family can keep living the life they love, the serenity of knowing you've planned well and can enjoy life. That's what we really deliver. We call it fulfilling life. Emeritus, insurance, employee benefits, financial services, and much more.
This is the Husker Sports Network from Learfield IMG College. You're listening to Sports Nightly.
Did you know Eeks Office Solutions delivers office supplies right to your business for free? On top of that, they make sure they arrive on time and even place them right where you want them. Eeks has great prices, convenient delivery, and best of all, you can order it all online from the comfort of your own office. Go online and order today at Eeks.com. That's EAKES.com, or give them a call, 800-658-4072. Need office supplies? Think Eeks.
From the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, I'm journalism student Grace Fitzgibbon with Campus News. Nebraska is committed to offering in-person classes this fall. Residence halls, Greek houses, and all campus facilities will be open and will follow local health guidelines. The university is increasing cleaning and sanitation in high-traffic and high-touch areas in its effort to maximize health and safety. More information at covid19.unl.edu.
Welcome back, Sports Nightly Monday night. Greg Sharp, Tim Curran, Austin Orman back at our broadcast studio running the show. Time for this weekend's weekend winners. Tim, why don't you lead us off?
Well, I've got an interesting story. You guys might have seen this pop up on the social media over the weekend, but there was a local news reporter in Florida who got an email from a viewer warning her that while she was watching the broadcast, she noticed that she had a lump on her neck and she better get it checked out. And turns out it was a type of cancer. So this viewer actually saved this reporter from a pretty scary situation.
Say that again. So she's watching the news.
Yeah, so a random viewer is watching the news and sees a lump on this reporter's throat, sends an email to this reporter saying, hey, I had the same issue. You have to get that checked out. And the reporter got checked out, figured out it was actually cancer.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
So it's uplifting in the sense that she actually was able to get it diagnosed and then get it, figured out. Obviously, it's not uplifting to find out someone has cancer, but if this viewer hadn't been watching that day, then she would have just been carrying on, not knowing that she was in, has a health concern.
That's great. Oh, fantastic. All right. Austin, what do you have?
Well, nothing that can match that. Tough act to follow, thanks. But, well, I have two. Can I do two?
Yeah.
Okay. So my initial one was Brady Singer, Royals pitcher.
Oh, baby. How good was he?
Real good. The Royals lose day one. They come back with a rookie pitcher in game 2 against the Indians, and all he does is go 5 innings, 3 hits, 7 strikeouts on 80 pitches, about 16 pitches an inning, those 7 Ks. He was really, really good, bordering on fantastic. That's a great sign for the Royals. My second winner is a late entry to the weekend winners, just popped earlier today, Phillip Rivers. Now,
Ben's favorite quarterback in the NFL, by the way.
Yes, Ben McLaughlin's favorite quarterback. He would adopt him as a son if he could. I'm still trying to be won over by Mr. Rivers, but he walked into the Colts facility in Indianapolis today wearing a Hickory High T-shirt. That's great branding. It's smart. It's savvy. You're walking right down the street from Hinkle Fieldhouse. So, he took a step or two in my book today. So, congratulations, Phillip Rivers.
Doesn't Phillip Rivers have, 10 kids?
He's got so many. Yeah. I think he and his wife can actually field a football team.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge, huge family. And Phillip Rivers is hard to watch play because he whines so much on the field, but I am told he's a great guy. He really is, and so that doesn't surprise me that he did that. All right, my winner is Anthony Rizzo. I don't know if you guys caught this. This is the Cubs' first baseman. Well, their opening game on Friday night against the Brewers, Orlando Arcia gets a base hit, so Arcia standing at first base. Rizzo, out of his back pocket, pulls out a little hand sanitizer bottle and puts it out for Arcia to put it on his hands and wipe it down. So there's Rizzo trying to make sure everybody is, staying healthy, keeping the virus away from them. What a guy. I mean, that's exactly what you would expect out of a Cub, Tim. Something like that.
No. How dare you? I mean, trying to frame Cubs players as actual, genuine, decent human beings, I can't believe you would do such a thing. Well, I'll tell you who my weekend winner isn't. It's not Rob Manfred. And I'll leave it at that.
What do you have wrong with him? What did he do?
He's got a situation on his hands, Greg. That's why. I have no animosity towards him. I'm just saying he probably didn't have a great weekend. That was my point.
Yeah, he probably did not wake up today feeling great. But I saw his interview tonight on MLB Network. He did a good job. He said, hey, we knew this was going to happen. We're not shutting it down because one team's got some outbreak. Obviously, if it goes beyond the Marlins, then they got an issue. But, man, Tim's ready to shut baseball down. It's unbelievable.
No, I'm not. No, we're good.
What a good hour. Good to hear from Mike Carmen as we previewed Purdue and the start of our Around the Big Ten series and told you that Arizona State's now in our top 20.
This is the Husker Sports Network from Learfield IMG College. You're listening to Sports.